For the majority of games, the early stages of progression are the most important because what you do now can make all the difference between a smooth transition to the endgame or a rough one, none more so than in gacha games where resources are far from abundant. As I'm sure you're aware, Wuthering Waves just got released, and with everyone understandably running into this game relatively blind, I figure it's worth making a guide on how to progress through the early game as efficiently as possible. For those not in the know, Wuthering Waves is a free-to-play cross-platform open-world action RPG that just got released yesterday, May 22nd, at the time of uploading this. And to celebrate the occasion, I was actually given a redemption code for you to use on screen, so make sure to do so for free Astrites. In any case, a number of you may have already seen my guide on how to get character experience. If you haven't, definitely check on that after this one, as the two guides will go hand in hand with each other. In the meantime though, let's not waste any more time and get started. First and foremost, when you log onto your account and begin your adventure, priority number 1 is to collect anything and everything you can find. Whether it's plants or materials in the overworld, chests or challenges you find, anything that can be interacted with, either pick it up, solve the puzzle, or kill it. It may not be useful to you right away or possibly ever depending on what you value, but for thoroughness, whatever you can find, be sure to do so. Start by going through as much of the main storyline as you can. You should be able to progress far enough to at least unlock most of the early to mid-game systems. Then once you hit the Union wall, in other words when you can't progress through the story without upgrading your Union rank, I would take a couple hours to run all around the world and reach every Resonance Nexus and Beacon. While doing this, you'll not only find many resources, but unlocking fast travel waypoints will be of great convenience to you if and when you have to revisit certain areas to unlock new domains or for questing. As a reminder, avoid upgrading your units except the very bare minimum required to navigate your way through the early game. Your SOL3 phase, aka world level, will advance in difficulty as your union level increases, but the overworld should not be that challenging for the first 3 ranks, give or take. In the interim, avoid spending or using any of your materials unless prompted to as you progress through the tutorial quest. The game will eventually force you to just to demonstrate how to do it, so you can do stuff like get your initial party members to level 30 or so. Your tutorial party units will consist of yourself, aka the Rover, Baitu, Chisha, and Yang Yang. In addition, as part of the game's release on day 5, you'll have access to Sanhua, so that will be your main starting group. You do unlock Yuanwu through the Tower of Adversity, but this section is primarily focused on who you acquire right at the beginning of the game. Of the 5, if you plan to spend resources of any kind, I can wholeheartedly recommend focusing on Rover, as unlike in most other gacha games, your MC is actually pretty damn good thanks to the Spectral version's time slow, which I'll talk about more later. If you do want to prioritize a 5-star, without a doubt, it's Verena. To celebrate the game's release, they're actually letting us choose a standard 5-star to guarantee. Unless you have a preference for someone else, meta-wise, from a practical standpoint, Verena would be the best early game choice. On the subject of pulls, that's another thing. Hold off on pulling for anyone with Astrites for a while. If you get any lustrous tides, you can use those on the novice convene 20% discount banner just to get your feet wet. Now if you're a waifu over a meta kind of player and Jian is calling out to you, then by all means, but definitely aim for a more conservative approach and only invest in units that you have a clear chance for long-term usage. Of course, if you get lucky and come across an early 5-star for you rerolls out there, like I said, Verena is arguably the best support in the game right now. The others are okay, but there's a big gap between her and the other 4. So just a TLDR, at the very beginning, hold on to as much resources, credits, and Astrites as you can until the player base at large can get more information. Especially with how complex Wuwa's combat is, it will be a while before conclusive statements can be made on the relative performance of characters. This will also give you time to learn more about how to navigate combat and stuff, since mechanics are of great importance in this game. As you progressively unlock more and more systems, start to work on your to-do list. It can be kind of overwhelming to figure out what needs to be done in light of the early game throwing so many things at you all at once, so I'll briefly summarize all relevant features that you'll want to make note of. First off, Waveplate usage. I'll probably make a proper video on how to budget your stamina in the future, but rule of thumb, never cap out on Waveplates as any subsequent time passing will not generate more. You replenish 10 Waveplates per hour or 240 per day, so if you spend all your stamina, just remember to come back within 24 hours to spend it again. Very similar to Genshin and Starl, it's preferable to avoid farming any of the early resource dungeons in Simulation Training or Forgery Challenge. The quantity and quality of materials depend on your union level, which is still very low at the moment. Instead, dedicate most if not all your first week of stamina to farming world bosses. On top of them being the literal only way you can obtain character ascension materials, world bosses also do drop experience materials, so realistically you have no reason to farm low-level Simulation Training or Forgery Challenge. Of course, this statement might sound contradictory to what I said earlier about being diligent when investing in units before we have an established metagame, but the main point is to get union experience, and by that you want to get the most value out of your early Waveplates as possible. You should be relatively fine working on Rover and or Verena's ascension bunch of materials. That alone will keep you pretty occupied. You can also, like I said, get your starting party up to level 30 or 40. What you're aiming to do is getting your SOL3 phase high enough to make the sim training in forgeries a bit more efficient. I'm not saying you're supposed to wait until you reach the very endmost difficulty to start farming. Just avoid the very beginner levels unless you'll be busy all day and want to empty out your wave plates fast before you go. Moving on, here's your checklist of dailies, weeklies, and early game activities to do. First one being your daily activities, a set of missions to do every day that give you a steady supply of rewards. This should be the first thing you do every day as it provides you with a small yet relevant amount of upgrade materials and, more importantly, Astrites and Union experience. Second are the milestones, a series of beginner achievements designed to usher you through the early game progression with a very high amount of rewards and Union experience. It's worth spending the aforementioned resources you've been conserving to get these, but you're going to be sticking around with milestones until you start working on level 60 units. Depending on how fast you plan to grind through the game on release, it will take a while for you to finish everything no matter what. Up next is the databank. The databank tracks your echoes, including how many you collected, kinda like a Pokédex. The more unique echoes you find, the better your drop rate, absorption, and carrying capacity per unit become. In other words, you have a big incentive to find every possible echo in the game, since that'll be your ticket to the mid, late, and eventually endgame. Echoes are scattered all throughout the world and through all the game modes in Wuthering Waves, tying nicely with what I said regarding interacting with anything and everything that moves, as they can potentially be enemies that drop echoes. Now, some of you might be wondering what would be a cost-effective team to get you through the early game. After all, in order to do anything, you need characters, but without knowing where the roster stands, what should you do to have a functioning party without worrying about your investments? Obviously, team building would demand a video of its own, but as a general rule of thumb, a good team entails one main DPS unit, the Resonator, who will take up the majority of the party's field time. Then you want a support or secondary attacker, either someone who can buff the main attacker, debuff the enemy, or have an outro skill that can facilitate their combos more easily, and finally round everything out with a healer or another support depending on how good you are at dodging. Until we get the hang of avoiding and parrying enemy strikes, everyone should have at least one healer. Two of the units I recommended in my 5 characters video are actually Rover and Baiju. Baiju is a worthwhile support to have at least somewhat leveled up and geared, as she's the only free healer right now, and in particular, there's an echo set called Rejuvenating Glow which gives bonus attack to the entire team upon using her outro skill, a good all-purpose buff to have. For Rover, not only will they have different elements in the future, so you might as well get them leveled up now, but Spectral Rover in particular has an outro skill that functionally behaves as a slowdown effect, giving whoever you rotate into a few seconds to attack for free. That's extremely useful in a Twitch-based real-time mechanical execution type game, no matter who your DPS is. For main DPS, you can always use the Rover themselves, but if you're looking for someone else, I personally think Dungeon's a fantastic 4-star unit with a lot of potential. Somewhat difficult mechanically, but what better way to get used to the game's combat than with a high-risk, high-reward unit? Just make sure you pair her with a healer. If nothing else, you can also just make do with only Rover and Baiju. Wuwa doesn't exactly force you to have a full team of 3 characters. In fact, the entire game could potentially be soloable with only one unit if you're good enough. As you enter the mid-game, which I personally consider Resonator level 40 to 50 or so, this is where you can really start working on getting your units built and whatnot, so later on you can tackle the new game modes that unlock: Tower of Adversity, Tactical Hologram, and Depths of Elusive Realm. These modes will be the cornerstone of your endgame progression, so best prepare for them right now. From here on, your access to resources will increase, slightly accelerating your rate of progression to match the growing necessity of it. This video will be mostly focusing on the early to mid game though. By this point, you should have made enough progress on exploration, milestones, etc. to have a good stash of materials to work with. What you want to do now is get started on equipment and skills. It should go without saying that most 3-star weapons will be overshadowed by 4 and 5 stars. Mind you, they're not entirely unusable, but it's best not to invest too much into early game weapons. Your focus should be to get to mid game as quickly as you can. Weapons are the centerpiece of a Resonator's attack strength, so along with the Resonators themselves, get their weapon levels up in order too. Echoes come next. They have 2 types of rarities: the classes Common, Elite, Overlord, and Calamity, and then the rarities rank 2, 3, 4, and 5. Reminiscent of Genshin and HSR, you don't want to go too crazy on rank 2 and 3 echoes since you'll eventually toss them out anyway. As soon as you're able to acquire rank 4 and 5 ones, that's when you can start to get to work. However, with high-level tuning materials being finite in number, I would hold off on rolling echo substats for a while and primarily focusing on leveling them up for their main stat. It's better for you to focus on the weapon and fortes, which are guaranteed in stats, then go for echoes last. That being said, just to have something to equip onto your characters, main stat-wise, pay attention to what stats they directly scale off of. For example, Baiju's healing is based on her attack, so you want to search for attack and healing bonus. Overall though, the echo set is the main priority. DPS units are good with echoes that boost damage of their type, so if you come across them, be sure to equip them. Definitely aim to get your characters equipped with their appropriate set effects. If you'd like, you can use your cheaper tuning materials, such as the ones for blue and purple echoes. Save the yellow ones though, even if you do have a rank 5 echo with a good main stat. it's gonna take a fairly long time to get your roster up to level 90, so a preliminary recommendation is to get a party of 3 characters to 80 instead. Once more, you should definitely consider having Rover leveled up if you're unsure who else to go for. Then your second character can be whichever damage dealer works with their playstyle. As for their fortes, aka talents, level 6 to 7 is about the sweet spot. There shouldn't be any need to go that much higher, at least for now. You can pass on fortes that don't pertain to the character's role, such as there being zero reason for you to level up your healing unit's basic attack since that's not what you'll be swapping into them for. Keep in mind, we're still underlining resource conservation. As you make it to Resonator level 50, 60, 70, 80, and eventually 90, you can loosen up on those things, but I would mostly stick to just 3 units for the duration. Naturally though, once you start taking on endgame modes, you'll need more DPS units on account of type coverage. Overall though, try to do everything possible that does not require materials. Many players fall into the trap of dumping all of their resources without thinking and finding themselves short for when they actually need them. You want to prioritize unlocking everything you can first, the overworld quests, game modes, features, what have you, and stick to just a handful of units as you progress through the early to mid-game. All the same, waifu over a meta. If you have a character you very much enjoy playing, even if they're not that good on paper, mechanical skill takes precedence over theoretical value. That is, an average character that you're really good at playing will probably be more successful than a good character that you're bad at playing. Ultimately, just have fun out there. You don't have to be super cheap about not spending or wasting anything, just use this as a general reference to avoid any early game pitfalls. Focus on making it to the late to end game first, and then worry yourself about who to max out or what teams to build. With that said, I hope this guide was insightful to those who needed it and entertaining to those who wanted it. As a reminder, watch my guide on how to farm experience if you haven't yet, and also don't forget to use my redemption code for free Astrites. It really helps out the channel. But for now, if you enjoyed the video, it would be great if you could leave a like and subscribe. Consider following me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and stay tuned for more Wuthering Waves content in the coming days. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.